Our next guest is running for Congress in California's 12th district. That's San Francisco, or as the locals say, Frisco. No, they don't. He is a civil rights attorney. He's formerly with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He won the second top spot in California's jungle primary. He's running against Nancy Pelosi. He is Shahid Buttar. Hello, Shahid. Thank you for coming on.
Great to be with you, Jimmy. Thank you so much for having me.
So in these final days, tell us about the status of your race and what's at stake in this election.
You know, we're moving a mile a minute. We're covering precincts across the city and to this point, we've made over 250,000, almost 500,000 phone calls. We've sent over 750,000 texts, and we'll be on the street in different parts of the city over the weekend while people are also on the phone and the text. What's at stake in this election, frankly, is nothing less, I dare say, than the future of our country. Nancy Pelosi, as you well know, unfortunately plays a role in Congress far from her reputation. And as one of Trump's greatest enablers in Congress, what is at stake is the opportunity for the Democratic Party to either fight for Medicare for all in the future and a Green New Deal, or instead to remain committed to a predatory corporate past. And ultimately, I'm running to liberate the 12th congressional district seat in order to help liberate the Democratic Party and hopefully our country from corporate rule. That's what's at stake.
Okay, so are people aware do you think in Nancy Pelosi's district? I think they're not aware. Do you think they're aware of just how much Nancy Pelosi is in the pocket of corporations and how little she has actually done to help people? In fact, how she actually helped engineer the screwing of people during the coronavirus bailout through the CARES Act. The CARES Act was the largest upward transfer of wealth in the history of the human race, and it was engineered by Nancy Pelosi, and it was voted for in favor by every Democrat and every progressive. So are people aware of that it's actually one-party rule?
I wish more did. I mean, we're certainly making the case in every channel available to us. The challenge, I would dare say, frankly, is corporate propaganda. You know, one of the things that we faced in our campaign is a corporate media whiteout. And just to give you an example of how that's played out, across every local broadcast news outlet in San Francisco, the only two that have ever covered our campaign are the Pacifica Radio affiliate and the Fox Television affiliate.
No kidding.
Which is to say ABC, NBC, CBS, even the local NPR affiliate, for 3 years found every day more newsworthy things to cover than the first Democrat in 30 years, the first immigrant ever in a November election to challenge the sitting Speaker of the House on a platform that aligns with the squad who is in every news cycle. And the idea that Nancy Pelosi faces this test, or even for that matter, the substantive critique we present, which is the point you're raising here. You know, she is presented by corporate media as a lion of the left. And we did an analysis to discover how many news stories we were quoted in or featured in relative to her. And the number was 0.07%. And that's a hell of a headwind to confront. And, you know, we're certainly doing everything we can. Like I said, we've made nearly 500,000 phone calls. We've sent over 750,000 texts. I'm on the street every day. You know, we're pressing the case as much as we possibly can and in every forum available to us to help people understand that the story we're told on Fox News and on MSNBC and on, you know, major broadcast networks, it doesn't line up because the story in Washington is not one of partisan gridlock. It is one of partisan uniformity. And no story to me tells it better than, frankly, Barrett's nomination and confirmation to the Supreme Court. Democrats, particularly from San Francisco, not just Pelosi, but Feinstein too. San Francisco Democrats did as much as any Republican to put Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. And I find it absolutely outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous. And the fact that more people don't know that is as alarming to me as the fact of that co-optation in the first place. You know, I fear that we will get the democracy we deserve, and I hope that we can do better than that.
Yeah, well, we're not going to, but what, so you ran as a Green before, but you're running this time as a Democrat, and you secured, so people don't, in the rest of the country, the way it works in California is we don't have a Democratic primary and a Republican primary. We just have one big primary, and the top two people get to go at each other in the fall race, right? So you could have easily Well, what is the advantage of you running as a Democrat if there's really isn't a Democratic primary or a Republican? There's just one, and the way we do it doesn't seem to help you. So why would you want to be associated with that corporate warmongering party?
It is a corporate warmongering party, and I'm running against the head of it precisely to try to knock out the leadership and steer it in a different direction. Another way to put that is if I win this race as a Green, it doesn't do the same thing. It liberates a seat, but it doesn't send a signal across a party. I have an aspiration in running against Pelosi, not just to represent my city in Congress, but to send a signal. And the signal will be, when we are successful, that no corporate Democrat can get away any longer with ignoring our communities. They will either show up for our communities or we will show them the door. If I run as a different party, the message isn't the same. The relevance to the political system beyond this district isn't the same. And I am running ultimately not just to represent San Francisco better, but to recover the Democratic Party, hopefully as a labor party, one that can stand for climate justice, one that can stand for universal health care, one that can stand for shrinking the Pentagon and reinvesting in our communities as we've desperately needed for decades.
Okay, I would be for all that stuff if we had unlimited time. We don't. And so let's go over some of the stuff that Nancy Pelosi's been doing.
Yeah.
8 million have slipped into poverty since May as federal aid has dried up. 2 new studies show the effect of the emergency $2 trillion package known as the CARES Act and what happened when the money ran out. So she did a stimulus package to help people, and it didn't help people at all. In fact, 8 million more have slipped into poverty. What do you say to that?
It's entirely predictable to me. It makes too much sense. In that first package, what Nancy Pelosi included before any rent and mortgage relief, before a universal basic income program, before Medicare for all, what Pelosi included were tax breaks for millionaires. 43,000 people who make over $1 million a year walked away from the CARES Act with tax breaks averaging $1.6 million each. And our government spent more money on those tax breaks than it did on aid to hospitals. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the CARES Act didn't make a dent in the dire needs confronting the American people because it wasn't constructed to meet the urgent needs of the American people. This is where, and one way you might know that and recognize that, and I dare say you see this too, is the fact that the Democrats and Republicans teamed up on it. Anything that brings the parties together, the one thing you can be sure of is that we the people are not the beneficiary. And that's precisely why I'm running for Congress, because I'm tired of the American people being fleeced, not just by Republicans whose intransigence we should expect. But I go here, I'm inspired by lots of different people, but one text in particular that inspires me is the letter from Birmingham jail from Martin Luther King, where he describes particularly the disappointing absence of our supposed allies. And when corporate Democrats run on principles that they then abandon in practice at the first hint of opportunity, I have a problem with that. And it's not just a problem with the misrepresentation of my voice as a San Franciscan. I particularly see the threat to the future, all of our futures, represented by Democrats not showing up, particularly for climate justice in an age of a climate catastrophe and universal health care in an age of a global pandemic. Those are 2 no-brainer policies that an entire generation of policymakers just does not care about. And I see why you see the Democratic Party as the voice that it has been for the last 30 years. I'm eager to return it to FDR's roots. And I want to make sure that the Democratic Party stands for a chicken in every pot and universal health care and a right to housing and food. Those are principles that are timeless, that bring us together. And they're exactly the principles that corporate Democrats like Nancy Pelosi haven't stood for. And that's why I'm eager to replace one of them, the leader of them, in Congress.
You are correct that none of the corporate Democrats has stood for anything or the people, but neither has any of the progressives. They all voted for the CARES Act. Because they were told to, and they won't even go against Nancy Pelosi. So that's the group of people you're joining voluntarily. And just to let you know. But anyway, so 8 million people have slipped into poverty. 4 million people are now, it's unemployment. It's now permanent.
Yep.
Right? So this is what Nancy Pelosi, this is her big fix. This is she went into work and to fix things. 8 million more people in poverty. 4 million people now permanently unemployed. That's not because of a natural occurrence in our economy. That's because Nancy Pelosi decided to do that along with Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump. That's a decision. That's a decision that they made to do that. while her husband got millions of dollars, all her friends got millions of dollars in tax breaks, like he just said. And but the people who needed jobs, they didn't do a goddamn thing for. And here's what she has to say about it.
Well, I believe in the American people. They understand people are hurting. We have to meet their needs. Not to give the president a chance to just say, I'm going to put my name on a check, send it out, and don't talk to me about food, rent, the virus, or anything else. That's all he wants is his name on a check that goes out.
Well, and all due respect, what's the difference? So as long as the people get the money, like wait a
minute.
Okay,
perhaps I'm not clear.
Okay.
So we're looking at it comprehensively. You're saying just so they have a check in their pocket, it doesn't matter.
I get that.
If they have food
so what is
rent.
your pole vault to get there? How are you going to pole vault over this?
We're just going to keep making our case.
So you're just going to keep making but the actual mechanics, the operational mechanics of making it happen.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic?
Yeah, well, we are legislating.
Okay.
We are legislating.
So I just want to get you to respond to that, Shahid, because that's Nancy Pelosi just flat out telling a reporter, and the reporter can't actually grasp it at first, that she's not doing anything to help people right now because she doesn't want Donald Trump to get credit for it. That's why she's not giving a check to people, which would be a great compromise between Donald Trump and the Democrats. They could compromise and send people a stimulus check right now. And she's sitting there going, I'm not going to do that. And the reporter keeps saying, well, what are you doing? Nothing. So let me just have you respond.
I find it outrageous and frankly embarrassing as a San Franciscan that my city's voice in Washington is showing up like that at this kind of moment in history. San Francisco deserves a voice who will fight this administration. And the idea that Nancy Pelosi is fighting this administration to the point of forcing the American people into crisis. And the point here is, who do we serve? And for me, the allegiance is not to a party. That's Nancy Pelosi's primary allegiance, is to a party.
Yes.
My allegiance is to the American people.
I hope
and
so.
Just to be clear, the deal that was on the table is 3 times the amount of the stimulus that was injected into the economy after the 2008 financial crisis under the Obama administration. That's nothing to sneeze at. And whatever we might do next year, the American people, we need help now. There are millions of people on the brink of eviction. There are more people hungry. When I volunteered at the SF Marin Food Bank, I've seen the lines around the block. I understand what people are dealing with right now. And the idea that she is a centimillionaire, born with a silver spoon in her mouth to a powerful political family, of which she is now a matriarch of a dynasty, that she is so removed from the challenges that confront the rest of us that she can afford to delay and just tell the rest of us to deal with it, I think is a reflection of the same abdication as her, for instance, signing Trump's unprecedented, unjustifiable military budgets, or funding his concentration camps, or slow walking impeachment, or putting Amy Coney Barrett on the bench in so many different ways. Nancy Pelosi has actively facilitated a conservative agenda while presenting herself as the leader of a liberal party. And while I am enraged by the party and the figure who leads it, I am frankly equally outraged by the press. Because in the 30 years that Nancy Pelosi has served in Congress, not once, ever, has she debated an election opponent. And it's one thing to be a public servant for 30 years, but if you're a public servant for 30 years during which you can't be bothered to show up to defend your ideas in public, to me, that suggests something much different than service and much more like entitlement. Nobody ever elected Nancy Pelosi to be a queen. And the idea that she feels so above the democratic process to pretend that she fights Republicans when her only election opponent is a socialist, I find to be, frankly, disrespectful to democracy, our city, and the democratic process.
Well, what's wrong with the people who live up there? Well, why do they keep electing her? And she's obviously corrupt. I mean, Ray Charles can see she's corrupt. I mean, come on. Why do those people keep voting for her in your district? What's wrong with those people?
Well, I hope this year that they won't. This is the first chance that San Francisco's had in 30 years to pick a different Democrat. And just to be clear, it is a Democratic town, so nobody from another party is going to displace the seat. So this is the first shot we, the people, have had at liberating the seat since 1987. And so, I'm certainly not conceding this election. There's still days left, and I hear every day from people, and I've lost count from the number of people who have told me, "Oh, I just voted for you." Or, "Oh, I'm on my way to vote for you," or, "Oh, my whole house voted for you." And I'm eager to see the result. I'm not confident that she's going back to Congress, but to this point, I think one of the reasons that people have been sending her back to Congress is precisely the partisan allegiance to the Democratic Party. And that's one reason why our opportunity to be on the ballot against her, because of the rules of the jungle primary, is so profound. This is the first time that San Francisco has a choice among Democrats since Ronald Reagan was in the White House. And I think that that's a choice that our city will respond to favorably. And I'm looking forward to representing us in Congress in the next congressional session.
So let me just play this for you. And because it's funny to me that what I say is that the people who scream the loudest about Trump, it's because they have a hidden Trump in their shadow. And if they were actually as upset about actual things, they would be upset about the cause of Donald Trump. They wouldn't be upset at Donald Trump as much. And here's Nancy Pelosi proving my point, because when she's asked an actual question by a journalist that she doesn't like, she reacts just like Donald Trump. Watch this.
Yep.
And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that to you in person.
Right. Madam Speaker, these are incredibly difficult times right now, and we'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much for joining us.
We'll leave it on the vote that you are not right on this, Wolf, and I hate to say that to you. But I feel confident about it, and I feel confident about my colleagues, and I feel confidence in my chairs.
It's not about me. It's about millions of Americans who can't put food on the table, who can't pay the rent,
and
who are
we
having
represent
trouble,
them, and we represent them,
getting
and
by
we represent
these
them.
long food
and
lines
we
that we're seeing.
them.
I know
we
you
know
are.
them.
I'm just saying.
We represent them, and we know them.
As we say,
we know them. We represent them.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, as they say.
It is nowhere near perfect.
Madam Speaker.
Always the case, but we're not even close to the good.
All right, let's see what happens, because every day is critically, critically important. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for your sensitivity to our constituents' needs.
I am sensitive to them because I see them on the street begging for food, begging for money. Madam Speaker, thank you so much.
Have you fed them? We feed them. We feed them.
We'll continue this conversation down the road for sure. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Every time you watch it, it's worse than you thought. That is Donald Trump with a wig. That's what that is. That is Donald Trump with a wig and makeup. And what do you say to that?
I think it certainly reflects the same pattern of belligerence that we've come to expect from our criminal president. And it's not the only similarity they have. I mean, let's just count the ways. Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi are both people born with silver spoons in their mouths to powerful, wealthy families who then went on to parlay that privilege into elected office. They govern by theater more than substance, both of them. You know, what is she known for? Ripping a speech, pointing across a table, snarkily clapping, which she actually said later wasn't even ironic, but she was sincerely clapping for our criminal president, who she has enabled at every point. And this is where I'd want to really draw the focus. If you look past the theater, she and Trump also are very similar with respect to their policy agenda. No policy, to me, makes it more clear than the funding of the Trump-Pelosi concentration camps. July 2019, Nancy Pelosi writes a $4.6 billion check. Fast forward a year and a half, and we discover forced sterilizations straight out of the Nazi playbook at concentration camps that Donald Trump ordered to be created, but for which Nancy Pelosi wrote the check. And that's an important point for people to realize. Everything that the administration has done, from DHS goon squads paramilitarily suppressing dissent in Portland and Kenosha, to potential CIA coups in 3 different countries in the last 2 years alone, everything that the administration has done has required the House of Representatives, embodied in House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to write the check. And that's a similarity that escapes everyone's attention. And then I think you're absolutely right to draw attention to the stylistic similarity, that not only are they governing by theater, but when the theater is exposed and anyone dares to pull up the curtain and be like, well, what's going on back there? Their response is to, you heard her in the clip. We represent them. We represent them. She said that half a dozen times. She doesn't represent us. She hasn't represented San Francisco in 20 years. She's been representing Wall Street. And she claims to be feeding us, which is, to me, so offensive on so many levels. First, the patronizing element of it, the aggrandizement of it, as if she's done anything to feed us, which she has not. This is coming from someone who is the 3rd wealthiest member of Congress, who is trying to deflect concerns about her allegiance to her class interest first by claiming outrage at a news journalist for doing the rare thing of actually asking a hard question. Nancy Pelosi, I think one reason she's offended by real questions is because she hasn't faced them in so long. If she ever showed up for a debate, she might know that. And the idea that she takes offense from that question by Wolf Blitzer makes very clear to me why her team dares not let her show up on a debate stage with me, because I can be absolutely certain that if that's her response to Wolf Blitzer, if she dared to show up on a debate stage with me, it would be the end of her career, if only because her record is so indefensible. And her unfortunate response to critique is also so indefensible.
So if you ever, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Well, if you ever do debate her, I would just hope you asked her what her net worth was. I just want to hear her state what her net worth is in front of a room full of voters. That would be amazing, because her net worth is somewhere around $200 million.
I fear that in our society, as it's been sort of like cultivated, people will be excited for that and then rally behind her because, you know, we have this worship of wealthy people. Yes. But, you know, I hope that people understand that it explains so much of her policy paradigm. You know, she votes in Congress like a wealthy person defending her class interests, not like the head of the Democratic Party.
So there's a little bit more of this. I'm just enjoying this, kind of going down her greatest hits of horribleness with you. If you're enjoying it, I am. Here we go. Here's more.
I know it sounds like a crazy question because you're the most powerful, one of the most powerful politicians in this country and in the world. Have people underestimated your power and the power of Congress, and you particularly? And how has that affected your ability to do your jobs and to get things done?
Well, I am very powerful. The power of the speaker is awesome, says she. I don't mean I am, but the power of the speaker is awesome. And we are able to bring legislation to the floor. We're able also to stop certain initiatives of the other side, should they have the White House or the other body.
I wish she used some of those powers occasionally.
Yeah, wow. Her quiver, unlike her ice cream freezer, was empty. That's what the problem was. Her defense against Donald Trump, you would see better defense at the Pro Bowl. All I'm saying is that what people don't realize is just as you were saying, if you're upset about the DHS going in and sending their goons into Portland, Nancy Pelosi funded that. Nancy Pelosi at any point can take the funding away from that. She did not do that. In fact, she re-upped the funding for it. So every year she refunds Donald Trump building a border wall. She gave him money for the border wall. Nancy Pelosi gave Donald Trump, she okayed, signed off on giving money for the border wall. That's what Nancy Pelosi's doing. Just so you know, she's funding ICE. She's funding those goons going into Portland. She's funding Donald Trump's military excursions to a tune of $132 billion extra dollars every year. Not just 1 year, every year. So that's what Nancy Pelosi's actually doing. And the people in San Francisco have no idea what she's actually doing, which is why you're having a hard time winning this race. And the reason why is because we have six media companies in the whole country, and they're owned by a handful of billionaires, and people like Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes do the bidding for those people, and so they think they're getting their liberal news from them, but what they're really getting is corporate propaganda, and they're manufacturing consent for people like Nancy Pelosi. And if they weren't there doing that, if they didn't have a nerd and Rachel Maddow, because you think, oh, a nerd's going to tell the truth, and a gay person, they would never lie. They're always virtuous, but they're not. They're both complete sellout corporate evildoers who are the enemies of the people. And I know you're not supposed to say that about journalists, but they are. In fact, right now, Chris Hayes is cheering on Glenn Greenwald being censored about telling the truth about the Democratic nominee for president. So that's the kind of people they are, and that's why you're in the position, and that's why Nancy Pelosi keeps getting reelected, because it's a big system, and it's a big game. It's controlled by a handful of billionaires, and we're not allowed in it. And as soon as I say something that actually threatens them, they'll do more than have a puke like Dave Weigel at the Washington Post write a hit piece on me, or somebody at the CNN do the same thing. They'll do worse than that. They'll just cancel my channel. And if you ever get close enough to knocking Nancy Pelosi off, you better start looking over your shoulder.
Oh, trust me, I've gotten my share of attacks, and I've, you know, if I had a nickel for the number of lies told about me in the last 6 months, I'd be as wealthy as the incumbent. But you know, for better or worse, we have to weather these storms. You know, democracy is a contact sport, it turns out, and you know, I ran for office because I care about a set of ideas, and you know, a bunch of people came after me, and all I can do is advocate for my city and trust the voters to look through the spin and look through the political machination and the self-interest of an establishment working to protect itself, and embrace the change that we all recognize that we need. You know, one of the things I'd point out here is that San Francisco we have the votes insofar as if you put Bernie voters together with Liz Warren voters in the primary, that was more than 51% here in San Francisco. And those voters, if they understood how Nancy Pelosi shows up in Washington, would be inclined to vote for change. And so we know the votes are there, which is why we think that there is a huge opportunity in this race to score a resounding victory on behalf of the future. It's one reason why I think tens of thousands of people have rallied around our campaign. It's one reason why we've raised over $1.5 million in this race against the Speaker of the House. And I think that's come from people recognizing the need and the opportunity. And we certainly have our work cut out for us. I'm not going to lie. We talked about the media bias that we've been confronting. So we certainly have an uphill race to run. But ultimately, my run is a bet on the city of San Francisco and me putting my hopes in my neighbors that enough of them look through the spin and see through the smoke and mirrors to look at the facts and their own interests and the concerns of future generations, that we make intelligent choices to choose new voices and make new policies that we need to respond to our communities. And I'm excited to answer that call. I'm eager to serve if I'm so chosen. And all I can do is offer a different voice and let the community decide.
Nancy Pelosi would not do anything to block Trump's nominee. Neither did the Democrats. In fact, just as you pointed out, the Democrats from San Francisco were the ones helping her get. Here's also the U.S. Senate confirms Donald Trump's pick for the vacant Supreme Court seat, Amy Coney Barrett, by 52 votes to 48. Wow.
This point about the San Francisco Democrats, just to underscore, it is the case that Democrats put her on the bench, but I just find it so absolutely preposterous that San Francisco's Democrats,
yes,
right? Dianne Feinstein was our mayor. Nancy Pelosi's been our representative for 30 years. Of all the places in the country to be complicit in the erosion of the rule of law and reproductive liberty and all the different interests that the court is going to put at risk over the next generation, of all the cities in the country to be bent in the service of right-wing jurisprudence, this one, really? I mean, this is the proud capital culturally of our country, and it has been for decades. If you go back to the movement for peace in the era of the war in Vietnam, or the beat poets before that, the era of gay liberation in the 70s, and so many different, before the Stonewall riot, with there were, similar events here in San Francisco. There have been so many different eras when San Francisco has led the country culturally, and we are being represented in Washington by people who are dragging our country back into the past. And I just think the fact that that has gone so widely unreported, I'm so grateful to you for just picking up on it. But I don't understand how the press more broadly, or at least San Francisco's press, has not made more clear to people the role that our particular city's voices have had in this incredibly unfortunate, illegitimate nomination. And I dare say, as outraged and as terrified as people are, we don't know the half of it, because the damage that the Supreme Court can do over the course of a lifetime appointment, it is staggering.
Yeah.
And I fear that our communities are going to be reeling from this for decades.
So our friend Mark Thompson does a radio show in San Francisco. Has he had you on?
No, I don't think so. Which outlet is he with?
I'm going to send him a text. I forget the name of the radio station he does a show for. But anyway, well, one last thing. I just want to let you know, Nancy Pelosi says she doesn't think the Democrats want a new direction, because the whole what they're digging right now is really big enough. They love it. It's really working out. Shahid, thank you so much for coming on. Your campaign has expanded the political discourse. I would say it's successfully challenged. I would like for it to successfully challenge Nancy Pelosi. That would be great. How can people help your campaign?
Thank you so much, Jimmy. You can find us online at shahidforchange.us or on any of the social media platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, at Shahid for Change.
Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.